back to a little debt that I owe you. We were speaking a few weeks ago about the way that the Shabbat is built, and we spoke at length about Erev Shabbat, about Shabbat evening, and about Shabbat morning, about the prayers of Shabbat morning. And there's one last part which is connected to the meal of Shabbat day and to the end of Shabbat, which we didn't touch upon. In the meanwhile, we went to other areas, the areas of the laws of Shabbat, and now we're in the final stages of learning about Shabbat. It's good to go back, in a sense, after we've finished. We started by talking about the principles of Shabbat with Rav Shmuel. Then I spoke about the structure of Shabbat. And then you started learning about what is Shabbat in terms of what is forbidden on Shabbat and what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And now closing, there are a few other topics that we will learn in the next few weeks, but closing on this, we can learn about the end of Shabbat structurally, the meal and the end of Shabbat. So that's what we will do today. And I'm very happy to see all of you. If some of you remember in the meetings that we had, the two meetings that I led a few weeks ago, I said that the structure of Shabbat is an opportunity to really ask questions, because there's not so much specifics of rules that we have to understand what we're not allowed to do and how much and all of this. It's mostly about going over what we are usually doing. Anybody who started keeping Shabbat in some way or another knows these things. We're familiar with these issues, and it's a good time to go over them and make sure that we know what we're doing, we know why we're doing it, and if we have any kind of question, it will be a good place to ask it and to make sure that everything is clear. So after this short introduction, I'll share with you the file. Let's enlarge it. Okay. So the last time we met about this structure of Shabbat, we spoke about the preparation of Shabbat and Shabbat evening. Now we will touch on the prayers of Shabbat morning and the end of Shabbat. So Shabbat morning has we pray Shacharit like every day. We are supposed to pray Shacharit. Last year, we've learned about the sources of all the prayers. We know that prayers are an important part of the Jewish day, and it's a very steady part of the Jewish day. We have to pray Shacharit every morning. But of course, since it's Shabbat, we can't ignore the fact that we are on Shabbat. And it's very interesting to see what we have on Shabbat that is added and why. So starting off Birkot HaShachar is absolutely the same thing. The morning prayers are the same thing. And we meet a change when we get to the blessings of shevach, to the praising blessings, what we call in our tradition in the tefillah psukei de zimra, which on the weekday we have 7 of. After Ashrei, we have 7 psukei de zimra. Those are chapters that we praise God. On Shabbat we have many more. It depends if you pray the usual nusach in Scandinavia, which is the Ashkenazi nusach, or if you have the Sfard nusach, which has a longer part of praising. But we have quite a few psalms of praise. And what's interesting about those psalms, if you looked at it ever, which I recommend to look over the prayers, it's not the time to do it in a halacha shiur, but we should all look over the prayers and understand what we say. And this is something that I suggest not only to people who are being introduced to Judaism or introduced to religious to how to practice religion, but many times to people who grew up religious like me. Somehow, even though I know Hebrew and I'm Israeli and I've been praying all my life, I never really, until a certain point in my life, tried to understand what is it that I'm saying. I chanted it. And the more used you are to those things, the less you listen. And that's a shame. So I can share from my experience that looking and learning the Psalms that we're saying on prayer, not in the prayer, because then, unfortunately, in most synagogues, you have to run to speed your prayer in order to be on the pace of the whole community, which is a shame. But we can I'm recommending to sit in a different time and study the prayers and understand what we're saying. So on Shabbat we have a special set of psalms that we say, and most of them are connected to the nature. Most of them are connected to nature and to the people of Israel. And it's connected to something we spoke about, if you remember, in the beginning of this small series. It's connected to the fact that Shabbat has elements of creation, the 7th day of creation, and of the forming of the people of Israel, who got the Shabbat. That was the first mitzvah that they got when they got out of Egypt. We just started this Shabbat, the story of the people of Israel in Egypt, and we should remember that Shabbat and the story of Egypt are highly connected. In a way, this is the answer to Egypt, where we were slaves. To have a day of resting is something that is exactly the opposite culture that we want to have, that every person, and especially our slaves, are supposed to be given a day off. And I don't remember who it was that said that the Sabbath is the biggest gift that the Jewish people have given the world. Now, this concept that one day we should rest. So Psukei de Zimra is mostly about those two subjects, about the nature, about how the nature is beautiful, regarding praises to God about his creation, which he rested on Shabbat, and about the nature of the people of Israel and their connection to God. So this is Psukei de Zimra. right before, I'm just going over the things that we say, especially on Shabbat. After Shirat Hayam, after the song of the splitting of the sea, which we say every week, every day, we say Nishmat Kol Chai, another beautiful song of praise, which is a bit long, but is beautifully written, which also talks exactly about that, about how we can't stop thanking God for his creation and for his looking after us. Then moving on, after right before Baruch Hu, we say Shochen Ad Marom V'Kadosh Shemo, which is an introduction to the blessings before Kriyat Shema, which we say after Baruch Hu. And then we have a whole passage about Shabbat itself. We say El Adon. We have a song, El Adon al Kol HaMa'asim, another beautiful and ancient song of prayer. And then La'el Asher Shabbat, Mikol HaMa'asim. I'm sorry that I don't have it in front of us. I should have brought, but I hope you follow. If you don't follow, please look at the Sidurim that you have. You know what, maybe I'll just open it here so we will have some kind of taste of what it is. Just a second. Okay, it will be too complicated to do it right now. I apologize. But if you follow, then it will be great. We'll finish in a second this part. La'el Asher Shabbat is a part of the prayer that we say after Baruch Hu on Shabbat morning. And the important part about that is that actually this is the only prayer on Shabbat day that we mention Shabbat. And so even on the Amidah, we talk about, we mention psukim about Shabbat, but we're not talking about Shabbat. We're not praying about Shabbat. And La'el Asher Shabbat Mikol HaMa'asim, the prayer that comes after El Adon, is a special prayer that we pray about Shabbat. And that's why in Halakha it says that if you missed all of Sukkot Zimra, you don't have to go back to it. You can jump over it. But La'el Asher Shabbat, you shouldn't jump over, even if you are late, because this is the part that we speak about Shabbat. After that, it's mostly the same. We have the blessings before Kriyat Shema and the blessings after Kriyat Shema. And then we get to Amidah. Now in Amidah, in every day, we have 18 blessings. In Shabbat, we have 7 blessings because we don't have a need to pray for all the things that we pray on the weekday. Those are weekday things that we pray on. So we have a condensed prayer that is connected to Shabbat. And we mentioned there the psukim from the book of Bereshit, Vaychulu hashamayim va'aretz v'chol tzeva'am, and we ask God to keep us and to save us on Shabbat, and to guide and guard our Shabbat, so it will be an oneg, a pleasant time. After the Amidah, there's we're reciting the prayers, and in the reciting of the prayers we have Kedusha. And I hope all of you are familiar with Kedusha. This is something that the Chazan, the leader of the prayer, and all of the tzibur, all of the people who are praying are saying as a little conversation. And it's the peak of the prayer. It's the most holy point of the prayer is Kedusha, to declare God's holiness and to join God in his holiness. And it's a very, very special prayer every day. I'll just say shortly that in case you don't know, we stand with two legs, one next to each other, and we don't move in Kedusha at all, because we are imitating the angels. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום. We are making your name holy like they are doing it in the heavens, which we hint to the malachim, to the angels who are sanctifying God's name every day. And we're doing the same. So it's a very, very holy prayer. And on Shabbat, we mention in Kedusha the wish for redemption, which is also part of Shabbat. So there's another element here that we have on Shabbat. Basically, in the prayer is a good opportunity to bring in all the elements of Shabbat and to state them as a prayer towards God. So when you will look at the prayers, you will see that there are many different elements that we are bringing in and celebrating the moment that we are in right now in Shabbat through those prayers and through those different elements. After the end of Amidah and the end of the reciting the Amidah with the cantor, with the Chazan, we have Torah reading. Now, Torah reading is very interesting because it's not entirely connected to Shabbat. I don't know if you ever thought about it. What's the connection between the prayer and the Torah reading? We're not reading about Shabbat in the Torah like we read in other holidays, right? If you ever noticed, on Sukkot, we take out the Torah and we read the source of Sukkot in the Torah. On Pesach, we read the source of Pesach in the Torah. Even on Purim, we take out the Torah and we read about Amalek, which is connected to Purim. But on Shabbat, we take out the Torah, but we don't read about Shabbat. We read the parasha. We read every day, every week, the next part, so we finish it in a whole year cycle. So I don't know if any of you thought of this question. Why do we do it on Shabbat? What's the connection? Is there any connection between Shabbat and Torah reading? And so I brought this source that is in front of you, that shows how it's not entirely connected to Shabbat. It has evolved into being connected to Shabbat with the sense that Shabbat is a day of resting. So we have more time on our hands. And so we should use it for something that is essentially very, very, very important, even though it's not, at least originally, connected to the subject of Shabbat. Does anybody want to read the source that we have here in front of us?
I can read.
Yes, please.
And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Those who interpret verses said that water here is referring to nothing other than Torah, as it is stated metaphorically concerning those who desire wisdom. Everyone who thirsts, come for water. The Ba'aita continues, the verse means that since the Jews traveled for 3 days without hearing any Torah, they became weary, and therefore the prophets among them arose and instituted for them that they should read from the Torah each Shabbat and pause on Sunday and read again on Monday and pause on Tuesday, Wednesday, and read again on Thursday and pause on Shabbat Eve. So they would not tarry 3 days without hearing the Torah.
Thank you very much. So what do you guys understand from this passage? What is the point of reading the Torah? Why do we read the Torah?
To not go without water for too long.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Other thoughts of, you can say the same thing, just what do you get from it? What thoughts does it make you think, this this passage?
It's yeah, the same thing would be that it gets you hydrated religiously or spiritually. So it's important to not dry out spiritually. So therefore, it must not go more than 3 days.
Thank you, Lars. Anybody else wants to share a thought about this?
So I think it's also continuity, right?
Yeah, yes. Say more. What do you mean continuity?
That you shouldn't have too many breaks or too many days without reading Torah.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, I think that maybe a significant element here is that the Torah here, the Torah reading, is not something for knowledge. We have a different mitzvah to know the Torah and to study the Torah and to understand from the Torah what's God's will. Those are obligations that we have anyway. This is talking about something else, as all of you said very nicely. It's about dehydration. It's the Torah not as a source of knowledge, but as a source of life. The story that the Talmud refers to is the story right after they got out of Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea and they started walking in the desert. And they went 3 days in the desert and they didn't find water. And there's a whole story there about how they found water, and the water was bad, was bitter and bad. And then God tells Moses to throw his stick into the water. And so it's a dramatic story about the people of Israel being very, very thirsty to death. And God saves them and supplies them with water. But here, our prophets understood another element, which is 3 days you go without water, and it becomes hard. You become weary, and becoming weary makes you weary, makes you unable to do what you need to do. And having 3 days without Torah is the same spiritually. And so we read the Torah not in order to know it or to remember it, or not necessarily, not only. This is a different mitzvah. We read the Torah to get life. And the time of Shabbat fits that, not because there's any connection. We don't have a mitzvah to read the Torah on Shabbat, but because Shabbat is all about refreshing, right? It's all about renewal. It's all about getting more energy, getting life, resting. So if we spoke in the beginning of this series about the idea of the positive side of Shabbat, not only what you're not allowed to do, but what you're allowed to do, or what you're supposed to do, what is Shabbat positively, then this is one side which is very, very beautiful of Shabbat, that it's not essentially part of what Shabbat is. It was never said that on Shabbat you have to read the Torah. But in a deep way, it's exactly that. What should I do on Shabbat? So I pray about Shabbat. That's nice. But what do I do on Shabbat actively? And this thing that our prophets learned, and they went 3 days and didn't find water, is essentially maybe one of the answers to that. We are using Shabbat to get life from the source of life that we have spiritually with which is the Torah. And of course, we see here that it doesn't stand alone, right? We have reading Torah on Monday and Thursday, which are equally important. In that sense, it doesn't matter how much we're reading. It's true that on Shabbat we read a whole parasha, and on Monday and Thursday we read only a small portion of the parasha, but essentially in this context, it's the same thing. It comes in order to give us more energy, more life, because we can't get along 3 days without Torah. We just wouldn't survive. Technically, I want to, since I speaking to a few people, I'm not sure that everybody is familiar with the Torah reading, how it's done, especially if you happen to stand behind a mechitza. So it's important for me to explain what happens here shortly. We learn in reading the Torah, there are 3 jobs: the job of the reader, the job of the gabbai, the person who invites people to say a blessing on the Torah, and the people who say the blessing on the Torah. We invite 7 people plus 1 to bless the Torah. 7 people. The first one is usually a Kohen, the second one is a Levi, and the third until the last are just normal Jews. Any person is invited to the blessing by the Gabbai, and he is asked to give his Hebrew name and the name of his Jewish father, and he says a blessing before the reading of the Torah and after the reading of the Torah. Traditionally, for many, many years, the person who came to bless the Torah also read the Torah. And actually, the way that it's the job is called, the job of the blesser in halakha, the one who blesses the Torah, his job is called reading the Torah, because there was no difference in old days. Anybody knew how to read all the Torah with the tones, with the tunes that we have, and everybody knew it by heart. And so anyone who would be called to bless the Torah would know also how to read his parts. Nowadays, unfortunately, most of the people don't know how to read the Torah, and therefore it was separated. There is a professional person who knows how to read the whole parasha, professional or semi-professional, and alongside him, there are 7 people who come on their turn, and they say a blessing before the reading and a blessing after the reading. So I hope that made some picture to anybody who didn't fully understand what happens there.
Natan, who is the
yeah.
person who kind of reads a printed version and kind of says to the reader that, oh no, it wasn't that word, it was another word? That's some kind of...
Yes, so this is yeah, I would say that this is also a sign of how the generations are declining, because if you know how to read very, very good, you don't need this person. And most people now need it for a person to go over and to make sure that they're not wrong. And it's a custom that grew more and more well known. I mean, not well known, more and more used in the past I don't know, maybe 100 years, more or less. But it's a fairly new custom, and it answers a problem. It's not something that we should be proud of, to have this job of the person. But you're right, there is usually a person that helps the reader make sure that he doesn't make any mistakes. Thank you. Now we get to an interesting story in our history. You probably noticed that, as I said a few moments ago, there are 7 people who come and bless the Torah, but then there's an 8th person who is called the Maftir, and this person also reads a Haftarah. Now, what is that all about? So this gets us, yes, Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that you asked us. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. If you know the answer, I'm sure it will be much better than what I say.
I think the Haftarah is from the prophets, because it was a period of time that they were not allowed to study Torah, so they but it was allowed to study the Tanakh from the prophets. So they find some parts that have the similar subject. It was about the same thing, and they study it, and because of that, they continue to do it.
That's absolutely right. That's
Yeah.
absolutely right. Thank you. Yes, it's because there was a time when we were not allowed to read the Torah, and so our sages found a part of the prophets that is similar to the Torah, or talks about the same subject, more or less. And actually, that would be very interesting. I once had a whole year when I learned in yeshiva that my preparation for the Shabbat was to try and understand the deep connection between the Haftarah and the Parasha. Sometimes it's very clear, and sometimes it's not so clear. And sometimes there's a twist to it. It's you see what's the connection with a interesting twist. So it's something to look at. And since after this terrible order not to learn Torah was lifted, we came back to learning Torah, back to reading the Torah every Shabbat, but no Jew wanted to stop reading the prophets. It seemed that it's not honorable for them just to abandon them all of a sudden. So Jews decided to read both, and that way we also get another taste. It's not only the Torah, it's the prophets. And since our sages didn't want for people who don't understand, who are not familiar with the text, to think that the prophet that we are reading is part of the Torah reading, it's a separate thing. They decided to add another aliyah, another blessing, and they called it the maftir. And the maftir, actually, if you noticed, it's very important to notice that the 7th person who comes and blesses reads already all the way to the end of the parasha, and the 8th blessing, the 8th aliyah, the maftir, we go back a few psukim, and we read again the end of the haftarah, at the end of the parasha, and that way we show that we understand. We finished the Torah reading, and now it's an aliyah that prepares us for reading the Nevi'im. It's a way to say the last maftir is not about the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im has no connection to the Torah, in the sense that it's not part of the Torah, it's not as holy in the Torah as the Torah, and we're not obligated to read it as we are obligated to read the Torah. But the maftir, the person who repeated the last few psukim of the parasha, will move on to read the haftarah, and that's why it's important to have a maftir. I hope I was clear about that.
But excuse me,
Yeah.
we have just one question. Why is this making the difference between the Torah reading and uh, uh, and the Haftarah reading is separated, it seems like it gets more connected. If the eighth person kind of read a little bit from the Torah and then go over that, then it's more like building a bridge. Why is this a custom of making it separate?
Interesting. I think it could be a nice argument. We could argue about it. I think that the way that the sages saw it, they said, if we finish the parasha and then we move on to the Navi, it's sort of the same line. If we do some kind of a repeating, then it's clear that we're now having a different thing, because it's not just moving on and on and on and on. We actually repeat it. And also the person who comes up for the Navi has already came up for the Torah. So it's not like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the 8 is the Navi, but the 8th still reads something from the Torah. He now blessed the Torah. That's what was important. And he also reads the Navi. But I understand your argument. It could be argued to both sides. So it's a shame you weren't in the room when the sages were there. You could maybe all of our Judaism would look different.
No.
Yes, but it's a good argument. It should be, we should think about it more. I'm running through because we have very little time and very much to go over. Yes, Michael.
I just want to ask you for something, but you can do it when it's now or after. If you can explain why we have the Kaddish between all the different prayers.
The Kaddish between all the different prayers?
Yeah.
Yes, this is a big subject. And if you didn't learn it last year along the prayers, on the subject of prayer, then I would ask, I will ask Rabbi Moshe David to put it in some curriculum, because it's an important issue, but it's a big issue. It's connected to different areas of values of tefillah. So I won't be able to give you a short answer now, okay?
I will also try to read about it. Thank you.
You should. Yes, Daniel.
Yes, I'm thinking about when you read a prayer and, for example, Amidah in Shul, and you are not as fast as the others.
It never happens. What are you talking about?
So should you continue on your own pace and finish, or because sometimes the Amidah is when the Amidah is read,
Yes.
then I'm I'm not finished, so I continue finishing the Amidah, and I'm thinking sometimes I'm thinking, should you finish, and the same with other prayers, should you finish your section or should you join the group?
You mean specifically when they're reading the Torah, or generally?
No, if the prayers, Amidah.
Any prayers. So Amidah is the most important prayer, and
Yeah.
therefore you have to do it on your own pace, regardless of where the rest of the people are. Specifically, when they say Kedusha is so holy that you shouldn't do your own thing when the public, when the kahal, when the tzibur says Kedusha. So the way to do it is to stop where you are. You're not allowed to say the Kedusha with them, because you're not allowed to stop in the middle of Amidah and do other things. So you're in a catch-22 here. What you have to do is to stop what you're saying, wait until they finish Kedusha without joining the tzibur, and then continue on your pace with the rest of Amidah. A special rule is that if you're saying Amidah so slowly that you got to the same pace of the repeating of the Chazan, in other words, you got to the end of the second blessing exactly when he got to the end of the second blessing,
Oh, wow.
You should say kedusha with the public and then move on
Okay.
on your own. And some people try to make this happen. Like if the time takes more, so they go slower and then they start their personal amidah with the repetition of the chazan, and then they join for kedusha.
That's smart. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Smart. Okay. So Musaf, I'll just say 2 words about Musaf. Musaf is a prayer that we don't say on the weekdays, and it's connected to the fact that on holy days, including Shabbat, there was another offering in the temple. So, as you probably know, Shacharit is marking the morning offer that every day they gave in the temple, in the holy temple in Beit HaMikdash, and Mincha marks the offering that they gave every day in the afternoon. On Shabbat, they used to give a special offering which was called Musaf, and that's what they did also in Rosh Chodesh and in the rest of the holidays. And that's why this prayer is called Musaf. And if you will see, every Musaf prayer, also of the holidays, also of Rosh Chodesh, talks specifically about the offering. And we quote the order of the offering of each holy day and Shabbat. So just I wanted you to know that. And Musaf, you're allowed to say throughout the whole day. It's not like Shacharit, who has a limit. Shacharit, if you didn't pray Shacharit after a certain time, then you don't have the mitzvah of praying Shacharit. On Musaf, it's not like that. Since in the temple, they were allowed to offer Musaf throughout the whole day until sunset, then also the prayer of Musaf is allowed to be prayed throughout the whole day until sunset. Again, it's very, very recommended to say it with the public, since also you have Kedusha. And also, usually when you don't do it with the rest of the people, then you tend to forget, or at least I tend to forget. So it's much preferable to do it with the public. And last thing about Musaf, the Kedusha in Musaf is considered a higher Kedusha. There's a more elevated text there. And one of the things we say there is Shema Yisrael, and that is also very similar to why we say the Haftarah. It's a very similar story when Jews were not allowed to say Shema Yisrael, so they put it as part of the Kedusha instead. And when they were allowed again, we didn't take it out of Kedusha. So this Shema Yisrael is a very special Shema Yisrael. It's a Shema Yisrael of Mesirut Nefesh, of giving, of being in a danger of death, just to say Shema Yisrael. So we should all cherish that. After Musaf, we get to a Kiddush. Now, a few things about this Kiddush, which are important. One, this Kiddush is called Kiddusha Rabba. In Aramaic, Rabba is big, the big Kiddush. And the most common explanation is that this is, in Aramaic, it's called Lashon Sagi Nahor. It's trying to say something nice about something that is actually the opposite. The Kiddush in the day is not as important as the Kiddush of the night. Because if you think about it, Kiddush, the word Kiddush is to declare holiness. The holiness is declared when the time comes in. The time comes in at night, at the evening, on Friday evening. So there's no real sense to say Kiddush again on Shabbat morning, at least from the point of view of accepting the Shabbat. The Kiddush, we spoke about it a lot. The Kiddush is accepting the Shabbat, declaring the holiness of Shabbat when it enters. There's no real use to say Kiddush on the morning when we're already in the midst of Shabbat, in the middle of Shabbat. And the explanation why we do say Kiddush is because we want to make this meal a Shabbat meal, a holy meal. It shouldn't look like a regular lunch. And I think that in nowadays, anyway, the Shabbat meal looks too much like a regular lunch. So so at least we should cherish the Kiddush, not because we're obligated to accept the Shabbat. We did that already the day before, but because this is how we show that this meal is an important meal. So we can't be lightheaded about the Kiddush of Shabbat, but we must know that it is lighter in the sense of the hierarchy of Kiddush. And therefore, as you may know, or you may see if you ask yourself, why Kiddushim in the morning are done sometimes not over wine, but over whiskey or over other drinks. This is the reason, because it's not as declarative or as witness. We're not as witnesses as in the evening, because witnesses do the thing that they witness on wine, like in a chuppah, for instance, in a wedding. But since this is not as important, or in the hierarchy it's less important as the Shabbat evening, we can do it not over wine but over other alcoholic drinks. So if you ever wondered, this is the answer. But what's important is the Kiddush is not as important, but the meal is considered more important, the Shabbat meal, than the Shabbat evening meal. And therefore we have an interesting halakha that if you have one special dish, the most special dish should be in the morning and not in the evening. Anyway, halakha says that it's forbidden to taste anything before Kiddush, after you've prayed, and it's something that I think that many of our communities in Scandinavia are not aware of. So if you attend a Kiddush in your synagogue, make sure to hear Kiddush and not only eat and then do a Kiddush at home. Hear the Kiddush and then connect the eating to the Kiddush, because we're not allowed to taste anything before Kiddush. And one more detail regarding this Kiddush. One more detail regarding this meal, not the Kiddush, regarding the Shabbat meal. And I'm touching here upon something that I know is a challenge for many of you, but our sages talked at length and they underlined very interestingly, because it doesn't seem such an important subject, but they underlined at length the importance of eating a hot meal on Shabbat morning. And that means that they asked us to get into trouble with heating and getting into the issues of how to heat in a way that is not forbidden on Shabbat. What are we allowed to heat, to start the cooking, as we talked a lot about before Shabbat, and then keeping it warm until Shabbat morning, and to eat not only dry hot food, but wet hot food like chunt or like some kind of soup, to not avoid ourselves from having a nice hot liquidy portion of food on Shabbat morning, because it's hard in the sense of how to do it halakhically. We have to face the challenges and to honor Shabbat with hot, warm, and liquidy food. Of course, it's not an obligation, so don't feel like you must do it right now. But this tradition of having chunt in Shabbat morning, actually, it's all over the diaspora of Israel, and it's very interesting. We know that in Babylon they did it. We know that in the Arab countries they did it. They call it chamin and not chunt. And in the European countries, of course, they call it chunt. In the Yemenite in Yemen, they had some kind of chamin. In all the traditions of Jews all over the world, Jews made it a point to have hot food and liquidy hot food on Shabbat morning. Of course, making sure that we're not breaking Shabbat, keeping all the specific rules to the point of perfection, so there won't be any kind of cooking on Shabbat, any kind of breaking Shabbat, but still doing it and not avoiding the challenge. Yes, Rebecca.
When you say Shabbat morning, are you talking about after the services, or like what's the sort of time frame?
Yes, I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. Yes, there's a debate whether you're allowed to eat before prayer or not. I go by the famous quote that it's better for a person to eat so he could pray well than a person who will pray so he can eat well. But certainly after you started praying and you finished your praying, you shouldn't eat, I meant Shabbat lunch, Shabbat noon, until you do the Kiddush. Yes, Michael.
So you can eat breakfast without Kiddush if you go early to the synagogue.
Okay, so I'll be more precise. It is a problem to eat a meal before Shacharit, and that's true every day. I hold, and there would be many rabbis who disagree with me. It's an ongoing debate in the Jewish law that you should eat something if your prayer would be hurt by not eating. Then it's a delicate question, what exactly should you eat? I don't think you should eat bread or to have a real formal meal, breakfast, but to eat some kind of cookie, of cracker, something that will fill your stomach so you can pray without being anxious to eat. I think this is not only allowed, but it should be done. Others think that it shouldn't be done and you're not allowed to eat at all before prayer.
Thank you. Can I ask you just to repeat one thing that you said before?
Yes.
It was one thing that was not allowed to jump over before you say the first Amidah.
Yes, I apologize that I didn't bring the Siddur. I should have brought Siddur to this session because we're talking a lot about the prayer, and probably most of you don't remember the prayers by heart. So I apologize for this. But if you will see, after Baruchu, there's a special prayer, La'el Asher Shavat Mikol HaMa'asim. And this is a prayer about Shabbat. Okay, we have 4 minutes, and in this 4 minutes, I would like to go over Shabbat afternoon. I'll do it really quickly, and then anybody who needs to leave should leave, and anybody who would like to hear a little more will be welcome to stay. So after Shabbat, after the meal, we should rest. Shabbat is a resting day. There's a mitzvah to rest on Shabbat. And there's a mitzvah to study Torah on Shabbat, and we could go on length why. We spoke a little about it when we talked about reading the parasha, but there's a special mitzvah to learn Torah on Shabbat, and I urge you to do it, to find a time in the afternoon to sit and to either discuss the parasha or read any kind of Jewish subjects that you're interested in. Mincha on Shabbat is a special mincha. If you can find a synagogue to go to, you should, because there's Torah reading. We're reading the next parasha already. So it's not a usual mincha that you do more or less the same alone and with the synagogue. You have Torah reading on mincha, so you should try it out. After mincha, third seudah. Third seudah is usually something that people tend to sort of not take too seriously. I must admit that with having kids, also in our house, it's very hard to have a third seudah. But everybody should make their most effort to have a third seudah, even if you're not hungry. Prepare 2 breads and wash your hands and have a very, very small seudah and say Birkat Hamazon. There are some who hold that it's enough to have 1 bread, and some who hold that it's enough even to have only mezonot, that you don't even have to have bread, just to eat something for the sake of the third seudah. And actually, according to the Zohar, the time of the third seudah, right before Shabbat leaves, is the highest time. The Zohar calls it the will of the wills. The biggest, deepest will of God is being expressed right before Shabbat leaves on the third seudah. And that's why many, many Jews on the third seudah are concentrated on singing holy songs and trying to give food for the soul as much as possible. I urge you all to do it. There are specific songs that are sung on the third seudah. Mostly Yedid Nefesh, which we say also on Shabbat evening, and Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Ro'i Lo Yechsar, which is a beautiful psalm in Tehillim, and you will find those psalms, those songs in every bencher or every book that has the Kiddushim and the songs of the 3 meals. By the way, if you don't have a bencher, you should get one. A book that has the Kiddushim and the songs of every meal and the Birkat Hamazon. It's usually a very small paperback booklet that you should get. And there are many versions that have also a translated one, a transliterated one, so you should think about it. The time is up. I would just like to ask you to stay for 1 minute, so I will talk about Motzei Shabbat, and then you can leave, and anybody who wants to stay a little more is invited. The time of Motzei Shabbat. Formally, the time of Motzei Shabbat, well, the question is, when does Shabbat end? And it's very similar to the question, when does Shabbat start? But we come to different conclusions, since in the entering of Shabbat, we know that if we will miss the time of the switching, basically the question is, when does the day switch exactly? We know when more or less the day ends, we know more or less when the day starts, but what is the point of the switch? And either it's the sunset or the stars getting out, or when exactly is it that the day is over already and the new day started? That's the basic question, and it's never truly clear, and that's why we take precautions. So before Shabbat, we take an earlier precaution, because we don't want to get into a point where, chas v'chalila, God forbid, we do things that are not allowed and Shabbat is already in. So we bring in Shabbat earlier than what is definitely the change of the day. On Shabbat, on Motzei Shabbat, we don't want to start again doing things that are forbidden on Shabbat when Shabbat is still here. So that's why we formally get Shabbat out a little later, or to be on the safe side in the time when we could be sure that it is out, even though probably formally, Shabbat is out a little before that. What the rabbis decided is that there will be 3 clouds, but not 3 small clouds, 3 middle-sized clouds. Now, if any of you is an astronomist, so go ahead and count the stars. But we have an order. If we are not so familiar with the subject of astronomy and the stars, even though we can imagine we see 3 stars, but we're not sure if it's big stars or small stars or middle-sized stars. So I urge you to look at your luachs, to look at the times in each country. But if you don't have a luach and you're wondering, search for a few stars that are visibly in a good way and not the smallest ones you can find, and then you can pray Arvit, the evening prayer, and after Arvit, Havdalah. Havdalah we do on a candle, besamim, something, a scent, something to smell, and wine. And there are reasons for that, which I can go through now for anybody who wants to stay. But just be aware that the basic things that you need for Havdalah is a cup of wine, some kind of scent from a growing thing, anything that gives a good smell, and a candle. The candle should be with more than 2, how do you call this?
Strands.
What?
Strands.
2
Wick.
strings, you say? 2
Strands.
wicks. Yes, thank you. More than 2 wicks. And the prayer of Havdalah is well known. If you don't know it, you should look at your Sidurim. And that's it. In the end of Shabbat, after Havdalah, there's a beautiful custom to have Milave Malka, a 4th Suda, to escort the queen out, to say goodbye. And our sages went at length about how dear is the meal of Milave Malka, and we could speak about that also now. But we've ended Shabbat. That's it. And anybody who needs to leave is welcome to leave. Shavua Tov, and all the best. If there are still people who want to talk a little more about Motzei Shabbat, I'll stay here a little more. So just let anybody wants to leave to go. Okay. Okay, so I'll just say also very shortly a few things about Motzei Shabbat, about the Havdalah. So Havdalah is actually a very, very special time. Shabbat is called Me'ein Olam Haba, a time that is as if it's heaven. It is the world, as if it's the world to come. We have a taste of what it is to be, in a way, in the world to come. And the leaving of Shabbat is a painful thing, because we're thrown back to the weekdays. And the more we are intensifying the experience of Shabbat with Torah reading, with song, especially in Suda Shlishit, with friends and family, then the more it is painful to say goodbye to Shabbat. And I think it's a beautiful test to us. Is it hurtful to us, or is it? Are we sad to leave Shabbat? And it should be a test that, not in a negative way, but if we don't feel the sadness, so maybe we can do more things to make Shabbat a more special time, and concentrate less on the challenges of Shabbat, which are extremely important as well, but to concentrate more on the opportunities that Shabbat gives us. But really then, we get to the Havdalah, and we can see how the Havdalah was formed in a way that deals with this hard to leave Shabbat. And I brought here something from the Talmud, that there are two phenomena arose in God's mind on Shabbat Eve and were not actually created until the conclusion of Shabbat. At the conclusion of Shabbat, the Holy One, blessed be He, granted Adam, the first man, creative knowledge similar to divine knowledge, and he brought two rocks and rubbed them against each other, and the first fire emerged from them. So this is a story about the creation of fire. If you remember, just to make some kind of how do you say, to comparison, then for instance in the Greek mythology, the creation of fire is a rebellion against the gods. In our tradition, the creation of fire is actually the answer that God gives to man in his dark hour. The time that we're using the fire first, that the fire was revealed to man, is when Shabbat ends, right? Because he was created on a Friday, or in the end of the Friday. And we know that we have a tradition of a few things that were created on Shabbat Eve, right between the suns, when the sun started setting. Many special things were created then, like the splitting of the sea, and like the whole of Korach, and like the Isaac's the deer that replaced Isaac when Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac. So there are many very special things, very interesting things that were created on Shabbat Eve, but God waited to create one thing or two things. Now we read one of them. He thought about it on Shabbat Eve, but he waited until Shabbat, after Shabbat, and he gave this to man to create fire. And basically, I think the idea is that it's a dark hour when we have this me'ein olam haba, this resemblance of the world to come, and then we're leaving it. It's dark, and it's really dark also in the sense that it's dark. It's just dark. There's no sun around, and this is where we get the fire. So this fire is a fire of hope, and is a fire that teaches us that we're able, that we have an ability, and we have an ability not only to protect ourselves, but this idea of God giving man creative knowledge, that exactly is what the weekdays are about, right? If Shabbat is about resting, the weekdays is about being similar to God, in the sense that the way that God created the world, he gave us the ability to create in the world. So fire in Havdalah is very significant. And the other element of Havdalah, which is the scent, is also significant, because the scent is something that we can't feel. It's something that is connected to the spirit. And therefore, the scent of the Havdalah resembles the scent of Shabbat that we want to keep with us during the week, also of Shabbat left. And so this is the idea of the Havdalah. And of course we do it on wine. Just one little thing about the candle, since it's really about having fire, it's not a candle like the entrance of Shabbat, which needs only one wick. it's a real fire. So it should have at least 2 wicks, if not more. And the regular Havdalah candles that you buy in Judaica stores has them. If you don't have a regular Havdalah candle, first of all, get one. But until you get one, the custom, if you have, for instance, only matches, to light 2 matches together and connect them until there's one flame, until the flame connects to each other. Of course, again, if you have 2 simple candles, so get the candles together until it's one flame. There's a custom that may seem very strange to you, that when the blessing of the candle occurs, people do like this. And you might wonder what that is all about. The custom to do it is to look at your nails. And the reason for that is that the nails have a reflection of the light. We're supposed to feel the light. So the question is, how can you feel the light? You see the light, but how can you feel it? How can you actually materialize the light? So the answer is, if you get your nails closer and the light of the fire is reflected on the nails, then you feel the light. So this is the source of this peculiar custom. And another thing that is in halacha again is that when the sun has set and you finish with the 3rd Suda, you shouldn't eat another meal until after Havdalah. So it should be finishing the meal, then saying Alvit, praying the night prayer, Alvit, Havdalah, and then feel free to eat whatever you want. And actually, as I said before, it's a mitzvah to eat Melave Malka. And there are special songs of Melave Malka, and many sages and rabbis, and also just simple Jews used to eat Melave Malka, to sit down, have a leisure time, say goodbye to the Shabbat in holiness, not dive immediately into the weekdays and into the things that are not Shabbat-like. And I just wanted to finish by saying that there's a beautiful custom. There's a story that it was said that on the Shabbat, it's a good merit for parnasa, for having money, to tell stories about tzaddikim, about holy people on Motzei Shabbat. And there was one rabbi who said, it's true, but I have a few corrections. You don't have to say, it's not a merit for parnasa, but a merit for anything, and not as specifically about tzaddikim, about holy people, but about any kind of person, to say beautiful stories and stories that warm your heart. So telling stories on Melave Malka is also a big thing. And this is concluding our lesson. I took 15 more minutes of your time, so I appreciate anybody who stayed. If I see there are a few questions, and I would be happy to take more questions. And then we will say goodbye. Feel free to leave whenever you need. Gisa Sala.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
First, I want to say I think you're a bit far from your mic, because the sound is a bit far now. And when you're talking, I think you're a bit far from your microphone or something like that. I'm not sure, but it's okay. We could hear you.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, you don't need to be sorry. We could hear you very well. That's why nobody. Yeah, I'm just telling you. And the question is, when you are a woman and you were living alone, you don't have a family, which means your husband or your father. I would say like that. I can perfectly perform the ritual, the Havdalah, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
and the kiddush and anything.
Okay, okay, that's enough. Thank you.
Yes, Rebecca.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the wine in Havdalah, because you said you need wine, but
Yes,
I've
go-
seen
yes.
other people, not to tell everyone who, using like coffee.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
So
Havdalah is like is even like I should have said it. It's lighter even than Shabbat morning kiddush. Havdalah, our sages say that we should drink over anything that is an important drink. So I think Coca-Cola doesn't go under this category, nor juice. Definitely not water, but anything that is an important drink. Now here there's some kind of cultural gap, and I'm talking mostly for people who came to my house for Shabbat and saw that I do Havdalah on coffee. This was the custom of my family, my grandfather, and I stayed with it also in Sweden, even though I think it could be a problem because in Sweden, coffee is not a special drink at all, as opposed to Israel, which it is. Here, people drink coffee like it was water. So I don't think that anybody should have Havdalah on coffee. I'm still wondering whether I should change my custom because custom is very important.
No, please, no,
What?
don't change.
No, change my custom. No, yes, I'm not sure I will change it, but anyway, anybody who thinks about what they should do, I don't think they should have coffee as Havdalah if you're not if you usually drink 3 or 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day, then there's no merit to have Havdalah and coffee. And not if your family around you do it. So I'm still debating whether I should stay with it or not to honor my custom or to go with the country's custom. But anybody who's a native here should not have coffee for Havdalah. But beer, I think beer would be fine. Any kind of alcohol should be fine. Wine, of course, should be fine. Yes, I'm sorry, I can't recognize how to read the name. Masiye?
Matityahu.
Matityahu. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, that is border when you can make Havdalah if somehow you cannot make exactly after Shabbat. And when is this border?
So what I've said is that it could never be really clear, right? Because the sun is setting and then the stars are appearing, and there should be a certain point there where the day ends, but it's very hard to define what it is. And that's
I don't mean like that, but Monday, Tuesday, you can still make Havdalah.
Oh, in that sense,
this way, yes.
Yeah, if you missed Havdalah on Shabbat night, then you can make Havdalah all the way till Tuesday. On Wednesday already, it's the second half of the week, and it's closer to the next Shabbat, so you can't do Havdalah anymore.
Okay, Wednesday, yeah. Tuesday, last time.
Tuesday, yes. And by the Tuesday, but not Tuesday night, right? Because Tuesday night is already Wednesday. And one part regarding that, it's very important to mention, if you must do some kind of something that is forbidden on Shabbat, and the Shabbat has already gone, but you didn't find the time to do Havdalah, you should say Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechol without the name of God. Recognize this Shabbat has gone already. You know, if you can pray Ma'ariv, it's even better. And in Ma'ariv, there's a special blessing of Havdalah. But if you don't have time for Ma'ariv and you have to catch a train or I don't know what, say Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh Lechol, but make sure not to forget to do Havdalah as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca, did you have another question or? No. Okay. Shavua Tov, everybody. It was later